This video will be rather swift because I have an early morning at Fault Lines, and I should not still be up doing shows. I am wide awake, for better or for worse, and when I am wide awake, when real men can't sleep, real men get up and real men do the news. I am trying to get... So the show tomorrow on After Fault Lines, there's going to be Political Misfits. That's our typical show. But my co-host is not going to be there. He's reporting from Iowa tomorrow. So what I'm requesting is to get my show aired from 12 to 2 in the radio studio. That way we can avoid doing the dry runs, which is something they didn't want us to do. But me doing my own show is a little bit different. And since my co-host is not going to be there anyway, I'm hoping that they say, yeah, go ahead. Try the controls, see how it works, see if you guys can get the calls and everything else from the 12 to 2 slot. Because I kind of want to see how many people show up at the 12 to 2 and how many call-ins we get. If we get a lot of call-ins on a random show, then it gives us an idea on how many calls to expect on the various shows coming up. So I'm excited about that. Not to mention tomorrow is Iowa, and so it will be pretty cool to do a show based on Iowa. So stay tuned. We'll see. I have to be honest, I don't think I'm going to get the approval to do that. And I was sketchy about even asking, but I went on and asked anyway because, the worst that can be said is no. And I didn't just want to run it because, again, I don't necessarily want to come off bad early on when I'm just getting the job and the show's not even airing. But nevertheless, stay tuned. You may see a show at 12 to 2 slot tomorrow. And that show would allow you, if you do see it, to call in. So stay tuned. Fingers crossed that I get permission for this. Now, that would not be Political Misfits. That would be the Progressive Soapbox just run through the radio station. But still, I think it will be a pretty cool thing to see how many people call in. The show that I want to talk about today, however, right now, and it'll be pretty swift, is that the candidates in Iowa are making their closing pitches. They're making their last remarks to try to get people to swing support in their favor. On its face, right now, Bernie Sanders is leading in Iowa. 4-point lead when you take all the polls together. The last few polls, however, have not been good for Joe Biden, but nevertheless, a 4-point lead is not insurmountable, especially when you're talking about a caucus where people are going to be getting together and choosing who they want, especially if the 15% they don't make it, they get reshuffled and they go to other candidates. Meaning Joe Biden, even though he's 4 points down, depending on the number of candidates who are in that race, who have supporters who are pro-Joe Biden, well, those people might lump on the Joe Biden, giving him a bump in the numbers. Sanders has to blow this out in order to ensure that he wins it. What about Warren? Warren, who was at one point almost leading this, has fallen down to 15 behind Buttigieg. Now, if Warren falls below the 15, her supporters will separate and go to somebody else, most likely Sanders. If she does not, her supporters would stay with her, and Sanders will not get that support, whereas people like Klobuchar will be going to Joe Biden, which means that Joe Biden may get a bump with the second-round voters of Klobuchar, especially since she's pulling 8.6 in Iowa. Warren makes her pitch, and in her closing pitch, she sucker punches Bernie Sanders. Now, you can make an argument to me that, look, these guys are in the primary, and you yourself have said, Jamal, that primaries are competitive. And you'd be absolutely right. Primaries are competitive things, which is why I thought Sanders should be making a contrast between himself and everybody else in that race, including Warren. He allowed her to run with a platform that pretended to be Bernie Sanders with a vagina. And I'm 10 years younger, I have a vagina, vote me in, dog. I'm saying the same things that he's saying. At no point did Sanders make a distinction. Warren blew a gasket when she had to explain Social Security. She has horrible political instincts, and just like she got the Native American test, she got suckered into explaining how she was going to pay for a plan that she didn't actually support. She exposed herself, and she started to tumble after that. But that wasn't something Sanders did. He was just being consistent. He didn't create a contrast. Warren blew that gasket. The same thing with Joe Biden, but let's stay with Warren for the moment. He never touched her. He never threw a punch. He never attacked her. Under no circumstances. out of the blue, she says that Bernie Sanders said that she couldn't win, meaning Warren goes to Sanders and says, effectively, get across, I'm running for president. And she's trying to convince people that Sanders said a woman can't win. Want some coffee? I'm going to get some coffee. You want anything else? Nobody believed that. CNN believed that because CNN is the one that ran the story. But you had two people in the room. One guy who's been authentic and relatively honest. The other person has ran somewhat of a dishonest campaign. Who do you believe? And then to pull that stunt on stage where she has the microphone and it's like, you call me a liar. Bernie says, well, what? See, it's knowing she has the microphone, knowing the camera is on her, and you call me a liar, and then get CNN to release that audio. She tried to catch Bernie Sanders in an uncomfortable moment to try to get people to believe that he was somehow sexist, or at the very least to bolster her own argument. When he said, what are you talking about? You call me a liar. It got across that he didn't feed into that he basically said, I never told her that. If she interpreted what I said as that, well, that's a little bit different than me actually saying that. Which means that Sanders coming across saying, I think it will be difficult for a woman to win is not the same thing as a woman can't win. Or saying Donald Trump is racist, misogynistic, and he would use everything at his disposal to hit a female candidate. Joe Biden saying Trump can't use those attacks on him is effectively saying something similar to this. It's a recognition that a woman running in the race with Trump, for whatever reason, even other people, when asked, say they thought a woman would have a headwind in running against Trump. That gets warped into Bernie Sanders said a woman can't win. My point is, she's been attacking him. She attacked him with the sexist charge. She attacked him with the liar charge. She attacked him when she was talking about his pamphlets and the campaign stuff. And now, in her closing arguments in Iowa, she is sucker punching Sanders. And she is feeding into the Democratic narrative of being divisive, meaning Sanders and his supporters, and not being able to unify the party. That's been an attack that the Democratic establishment has been using. Clinton, Neera Tanden, all of these people have been using that very specific attack. And Warren, somebody who's supposed to be a friend, in her closing remarks, is leaning and feeding into that very specific attack. I'm going to read you what Warren said, and I'll let you decide on who she is talking about when she's saying this. Welcome to a late night after dark soapbox. My name is Jamal Thomas. This is the Progressive Soapbox. Guys, if you dig this content, please like, share, subscribe. You can always support PayPal patron. I'm paranoid about this mic now because it gave me a weird sound earlier. This video is not going to be long. Ultimately, I just want to point out Sanders will never do this to Warren. This is always coming from Warren. Whatever Sanders supporters may do in going after Warren, well, those are his supporters, and Warren supporters say hateful things too, just like Biden supporters and Clintonites say very hateful things. So let's not act as if it's only Sanders supporters. The only difference here is Sanders has a lot more supporters, meaning because his supporters are younger, meaning 18 to 34, and now he's getting a few more in higher demographics, but that demographic is the graphic that is more vocal, more online, and more representing the interests of their particular candidate. If there is any notion of division, it's not that it's divisive, it's just there are more of us than you. That's all. It's an issue of numbers. It's not that the Sanders is more divisive. Sanders, in fact, doesn't throw a punch when his supporters are screaming for him to throw a punch. But his supporters are there to support their candidate, and campaigns are supposed to be competitive. Now, so I don't hit Warren for throwing this punch. I hit Warren because these people were acting as if these two people were on a team and that there was a pact, that they wouldn't attack each other. That pact seemed to only last up until the point where Warren was in the lead. The moment that she fell out of the lead and she gets desperate, she throws a punch at the guy who has never thrown a punch at her and who supposedly them two were in it together. I never believed they were in it together. They weren't in it together when she signed that pledge to not or to back Hillary in the 2016 election. They weren't together when she jumped in this particular race knowing that Sanders was going to be in this race. She weren't together when they were acting as if she was for Medicare for all and was aping his policies and even the rhetoric that he was using in this race, trying to pretend to be him, sapping his support. None of these things bespeaks of people running together and then, when he got desperate, threw a knife at the guy. Her ending pitch is effectively leading into what the Democratic Party has been saying, that ultimately she has a broad base of support and that Sanders can't unite the party, that he has a narrow base of support. This is the Washington Examiner. You have to take what the Washington Examiner says with a grain of salt. But if this is a direct quote, then it's a direct quote. Doesn't matter who's publishing that particular quote. Elizabeth Warren's final pitch to Iowa Democrats ahead of Monday's opening primary contest includes a swing at left-wing rival Bernie Sanders. I've been building a campaign from the beginning that is not a campaign that's narrow, Warren, 70, said Saturday. Not a campaign that says it's us and nobody else. It's a campaign that says, come on in because we're in this fight together. This fight is our fight. She continued with this. I've heard from you. You've pressed notes into my hand. You've whispered dreams into my ears. You've told me about your lives, about your issues, about your ideas, about how we can make things better. And this year you have made me a better candidate and you will make me a better president. We're down to the final strokes here, but understand we must come together as a party and beat Donald Trump. The interesting part is the top part, the first few statements. I've been building a campaign that is not a campaign that is narrow, not a campaign that says it's us and nobody else. Now, what is Bernie Sanders' campaign statement? It's us. What is it? A campaign, us, not me, or something like that. Effectively, it's all of us, not just me. I am not the person who's the focus of this campaign. I am the avatar, effectively, of your will. His us in this is representative of the collective us of the nation. Warren uses that us and makes the point that it's us and nobody else, as if the Sanders camp and the us that Sanders is talking about is limited to a very select group of individuals. But that's not true. It's not a campaign that's narrow. In fact, this is kind of like her putting courageous on the side of her bus when she wouldn't support Sanders or called herself a Native American for 40 years and wouldn't stand up for Native Americans as Standing Rock. It's nonsense. Her major base of support are the sipping wine crowd, the people who are making $100,000 a year, effectively white voters, people who are part of the corporate Democrats who could float between her and Buttigieg pretty easily. So yes, she is getting a share of Sanders supporters, and if she wasn't in this race, many of those people go to Sanders the most. But her demographic needs to be understood as a narrow, wine-sipping, doctorate degree, professorial demographic. That's her base. So to say she has a wide coalition is somewhat of dishonest. Sanders has a multiracial coalition. The number one group is the people of color in his campaign. He has more people of color than the other campaigns, including Joe Biden's campaign, because he's getting a large demographic of the Hispanic vote. He's getting a large share of the African American vote that's under 34. He's getting the white working class. He's getting the union voters, meaning he's been able to wedge together white, black, gay, straight, all of these different disparate groups under this banner that the issue is class, not race. Warren has, for the most part, dropped that. Maybe not entirely, but she's gone so far as I'm going to trans person to effectively choose my education secretary. She has gone entirely into this notion of identity politics, boosting the idea of her being a woman, etc., etc. Before, it was an economic message. When campaigns are doing well, they don't mess around with the message if it's working. When a campaign is not doing well, they'll sucker punch their friends and they'll be all over the place in regards to their messaging. Like a man falling through a tree branch or falling through a bunch of trees trying to grab on a branch before he hits the ground. All I'm saying is this is low. This is low. He would have never, under any circumstances, have done this to you. Owen Johnson, hey Jamal, everybody sign and share Change.org petition to draft Nina Turner as vice president. She has Bernie's back, calling out BS when he won't. Look, I like me some Nina Turner. I don't know if I want her for vice president. I mean, I kind of like her at the helm of our revolution, pushing and being part of the process and being part of his, talking to him about politics and positions. Meaning the fact that she's an attack dog on this stuff and she's willing to call out BS. Well, she could be willing to call out BS to him to get him to be a little bit more aggressive when he goes out and pursues this campaign. She doesn't need to be the vice president for that. I wouldn't be bothered if he chooses her for vice president, though. I like me some Nina Turner. So, I got to be honest, I don't necessarily know who is going to take that role. I strongly suspect it's going to be a person of color. I strongly suspect it's going to be somebody who's younger. The person who's younger, however, is probably going to be somebody who will carry out his agenda full-throatedly. Meaning there are no qualms. It's not putting Elizabeth Warren in and you don't know what Elizabeth Warren stands for, what Elizabeth Warren is going to do outside of something like a wealth tax. He's putting somebody in that is going to represent his particular agenda. And I don't think it's going to be enough just for the person to be a woman. I think it's going to be a person of color. I know a lot of people are thinking it's going to be Elizabeth Warren. I don't buy that. Like, I'm not buying, there may be something necessary to unify the party. Like, she has a certain degree of delegates because she's been sapping them away and he needs to bring her people into his fold. So there may be something like that. I am not even all that clear on whether Elizabeth Warren would support Sanders. The longer she stays in the race, the longer it hurts him. And what it seems like is that when the original plan of sapping his votes away, hey, let's make a pact. And in this pact, I'm not going to attack you. You're not going to attack me. Great. Now I'm going to run pretending to be you. And since you're not going to attack me, nobody is ever going to break that clear that, I'm not actually you. Then it falls apart and she attacks him. Meaning he was willing to abide by that when he was losing and he had fallen into third place. She was not willing to abide by that when she started to lose and fell into third and fourth place. It seems like the game plan was sap away enough support so Joe Biden could get over the finish line. When that didn't work, all right, just attack him now. Just try to take him down. Call him sexist. Try to tackle the guy. Who is she in this race for? I keep asking that. If these two are on a team, at some point Elizabeth Warren would get out and she'd support Sanders. If they were on a team. If they were on a team, you wouldn't think that she'd try to put a knife in him and try to tackle the guy. That's all. That's why I'm skeptical of her motives in this. I think the DNC, yes, would try to get somebody as a proxy to injure Sanders. And knowing that Warren would be the person who would be able to sap enough strength from Sanders that somebody else maybe get over the finish line. It was just a quirk that Warren started to bump up in the polls. And it's not that I don't think she's running for herself, but I also think she is a proxy for the Clintons who does not want Sanders to win and knows that somebody like Warren could rob away support from Sanders. It didn't work. At least not entirely. The guy's surging. And now we got to hit him. Warren included. I'll leave this here. I mean, like I said, I didn't want this video to be long, but I did want to point this out. Like, share, subscribe. Share this video. Thanks all.